ないものを一生懸命見たい。ね、それはやっぱり、どう言ったらいいかな、目をこらえる、立ち止まるみたいなのが写真の一番基本だと思うんですよね、私にとってはね。でもこんなちっちゃい写真だけど、もう一個がなんか私が今までずっと生きてきた一つの証。
Hi there. I recently produced a video on Nobuyoshi Araki, and I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the work of another Japanese photographer, Miyako Ishiuchi, who was born just 7 years after he was born. They both were influenced by the experience of growing up in post-Second World War Japan. However, her concerns and dominant themes are very different from Araki's. In Japan, people are often referred to using surname followed by given name. But for this video, I'll refer to her by her family name. The 1968 Japanese university uprisings gave form to her individualistic nature. Instead of sticking to the assigned role of providing food for the men holding the barricades, she joined them at the front line. She doesn't see herself as an activist or a feminist photographer, but because she's a woman, she has an interest in what it means to be a woman. In 1976, she organized the exhibition Kayake Yoran at the Shimizu Gallery in Yokohama, which showed the works of 10 female photographers, including herself. Japanese women at that time weren't taken seriously within the photography field. These women deliberately rebelled against tradition by choosing to direct their gaze towards men, producing portraits. Ishiuchi pushed things a bit further by photographing male nudes. The exhibition was viewed merely as a combative spectacle and provided titillation for the tabloids. But now it's considered to be a significant milestone in Japanese photography. It also marked the beginning of Ishiuchi's career. A year later, she produced her series Yokosuka Story. She grew up in the town Yokosuka, which was home to a major American naval base. Even when very young, she was acutely aware that she was living in an occupied country and that there were dangers associated with this. The town was filled with largely inactive troops. Violence, including rape, was not uncommon. As a young woman, she found this ever-present potential for violence repellent, but she was also drawn to the complexity of the cultural mismatch. やっぱりね、私は嫌いですよね。嫌いっていうよりも、なんだろうな、横須賀っていう町の傷だらけの町なんですよ。だから痕跡とか傷跡とかどっちかってネガティブ、普通に言うとネガティブだと思うけど、私にとってはそれがすごく美しいなとどっかあるんですね。失われた時間も含めて、ただ現実的に今あるから、私の前に。だそういう今ある現実として遺品たちもあるし、やっぱ時間の堆積で時間が溜まってる場所っていうのは写真を撮れるわけですよね。After being away from the town for 10 years, she began returning on weekends to photograph. Other Japanese photographers like Daido Moriyama had photographed the town, but mainly focusing on the American quarter. Ishiuchi, having experienced growing up there as a young woman, approached the subject in a more intimate and personal manner. She was returning to her roots, illustrating feelings and stories from her childhood. She captured the lingering presence of the US occupation using the subversive style of post-war Japanese photography. The pictures were often grainy, blurry, and out of focus. From this severe aesthetic, one gains a sense of her lingering, dark memories. The pictures are filled with fear, grief, resentment, and disorientation. With money that her father had put aside for her wedding, and using a darkroom that she set up in her parents' home, Ishiuchi printed her photographs of Yokosuka for a 1977 exhibition at the Nikon Salon in Tokyo. She took the title Yokosuka Story from a Japanese pop song.
それで高校に通う通学路に赤線っていう要するにその売春宿があったの。でいつもその前をね朝と夕方歩くでしょ。何か変なの雰囲気が。なんだろうこの街はおかしいなってすごい感じていて、でも誰も教えてくれないよね。そこはそこも行っちゃいけないみたいなところで結局私の一番初めはまず横須賀っていう街を撮ること、ね、私がすごくある種傷を受けた街である横須賀っていう街を撮ることによって何か新しいスタート。
She wasn't quite ready to let the subject go and returned a few years later to produce a new series, Yokosuka Again. This time she targeted the places that terrified her most, including Gutter Alley, a street that during her youth was filled with bars where American soldiers and prostitutes hung out. She had been forbidden by her parents to enter this street, and it represented the epicenter of her anxiety. In 2005, she took an interest in scars. She saw their potential for revealing personal histories, and she regarded these disfigurements as evidence of the pains and wounds of a lifetime, proof that one's still alive. She initially became aware of scarring and wounds while photographing men for an earlier project, but then she extended the work by enlisting friends, family members, and acquaintances. She doesn't actually identify her sitters by name, but instead refers to the cause of each scar, like accident or illness. These scars become symbols of the individual's victory over possible defeat. Throughout her career, Ishiuchi used photography as a means of connecting the past and the present. She observes both the physical and the psychological traces that remain as time passes. In 2000, she began photographing her 84-year-old mother, capturing close-up views of her skin, her thinning hair, and the scars from a cooking accident that covered about a third of her body. During the first exhibition of this series, her mother was diagnosed with liver cancer, and she died within a few months. She was left with her deceased mother's belongings and what she described as a grief surpassing imagination. Ishiuchi began to photograph her mother's possessions, her lipstick, lingerie, shoes, and dentures. Her brush was still tangled with strands of her hair. In one photograph, we can see a much younger version of her mother. The shot was taken in the 1940s. She was young and fashionable, standing next to the open door of a taxi. This work was selected to represent Japan at the 2005 Venice Biennale.
マザーズというのはいろんな意味で残されたものたちのもうこれはまあ要するにそんな遺品として立派なものじゃないから捨てるしかない、ね、捨てるしかない運命のものたちって今まで大切に本人が使ってたものがすぐゴミになってしまうその瞬間みたいなものをちゃんと私は取ってあげようと思った、それがマザーズなんですよ。
The exposure led to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, inviting her to capture everyday objects which had belonged to the victims of the atomic bomb. Also, the Museo Frida Kahlo commissioned her to photograph Kahlo's possessions, which were held in the museum archive. Ishiuchi had studied weaving and textile design at university, and only picked up a camera when she was 28. An acquaintance of hers had a darkroom and she experimented with the roll of photographic paper. She discovered an equivalence between the darkroom process and the dyeing of textiles. This realization became significant in her approach to these two projects. She also recognized the highly personal nature of clothing and how they take on some of our characteristics like a second skin. For her Hiroshima series, she primarily focused on objects that had been in direct contact with the bodies of the victims at the moment of the bombing. She also expanded upon her backlighting process that she had used while photographing her mother's undergarments. In her mother's series, she had captured the garments by backlighting them with sunlight. But for her Hiroshima picture, she began to use a lightbox to illuminate the fabrics. This method allowed her to create a sense of the ghost-like auras of the victims. When installing her work in a gallery or museum, Ishiuchi would reinforce this idea by floating the photographs on the walls. It would appear as if they were highlighted by the artificial sun created by the exploding nuclear device. She manages to create tension by fracturing the viewer's point of focus. One is drawn to the textures and colors of the textiles, while at the same time one becomes aware of the effects of the irradiation, the holes, stains, and frayed edges.
で資料館行ったらモノクロじゃないです。当たり前だよね。色があるの、洋服たちに。びっくりしちゃって。だってモノクロの広島の写真しか見たことなかったからね。で広島の遺品は全部モノクロの感じで、なんとなくこう寂しくて辛くて悲しくてね、重いっていうイメージで見てたらさ、違うんですよ。かっこいいの、綺麗なの、素敵なの。
During the war, because of shortages, women were forced to hide their silk dresses by wearing them beneath their working clothes. When they were damaged, these precious fabrics were lovingly sewn. These personalized stitch marks that we see become traces or connections to the individuals that once owned these garments. At the end of this video, I'll run some pictures from her Frida by Ishiuchi. Carla's husband had requested that her bathroom with 300 items of clothing, jewelry, and personal belongings be sealed for 50 years. After Carla's death in 2004, the room was unsealed, and it was these items that Ishiuchi photographed. Although during her career, Miyako Ishiuchi's style evolved, her dominant themes never changed. Her photography essentially focuses on the pain embedded within memories. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you next time.